Okay, ISO, a little bit of dynamic range test. Sony a7S Mark III on the left, Canon 5D Mark IV on the right, HD 24 frames per second. Okay, this ISO is ISO 640. ISO 1600 on the Sony. ISO 1600 on the Canon. Sony's recording S-Log3. Color temperature is dialed in manually to 3200 Kelvin. Canon is shooting basically movie, but neutral picture profile. Kelvin dialed into 3200. Okay, adjusting ISO now. Okay, cameras are matching all settings still. We're now at 3200 ISO, 1/1000th of a second, f4 aperture. For the last two, ISO 640 and ISO 1600, we were at f4, 1/50th of a second. Aperture will remain constant throughout this whole test at f4 at both cameras. Okay. Okay. ISO 6400 on both cameras. Aperture still f4, 1/200th of a second. Okay. ISO 8000, 1/250th of a second, f4. Okay. Oops. ISO 10,000, aperture f4, 1/320th of a second. This should be fairly noisy on the Sony. Dual ISO should be kicking in at 12,800. Let's take a look. 12,800 on the Sony. Okay, ISO 12,800 now on both cameras. f4, 1/400th of a second. Okay, let's keep going. ISO 16,000. 1/500th of a second on both cameras, still f4. ISO 16,000. Okay, cranking up the ISO further. 25,600. ISO 25,600 both cameras, 1/800th of a second, shutter, f4. Let's keep it cranking. ISO 32,000 on both cameras. Shutter 1/1000th. Oh my god, can't talk. 1/1000th of a second. F4. This is high 1 for the Canon in video mode. Okay, let's move it out. Okay, the Sony we're at ISO 40,000. On the Canon, it just says high 1. Okay, so previously it was high, it's just high 1. It's not telling me what the ISO is. This might be 50,000. Okay, we're up to ISO 51,200 on the Sony. So here we go, just ISO high 1. Previous was ISO high. This is high 1. I think this is 51,200. I think the ISOs are matched here. Hold in here for a moment. ISO 51,200 on the Sony, and the Canon's unclear, but I think it's also 51,200. Okay, this is high 2 on the Canon. $64,000 on the Sony. Again, ISO high 2 on the Canon. I'm assuming it's 102,400, but it might be lower. Looks very noisy on the little LCD screen. Shutters and apertures are matched. And that's it for the Canon. It's maxed out at whatever it is. Okay, Sony, 80,000. This is 102,400 now on the Sony. $128,000 on the Sony. $160,000 on the Sony. $204,800 on the Sony. Canon is still at that high too. $256,000 on the Sony. $320,000 on the Sony. And finally, $409,600 on the Sony. Let's real quick go way down. $640 on both. Okay, hold on. 640 on both. Okay. ISO 640 on both. Only difference is shutter. Canon at 1/25 of a second, Sony at 1/50th of a second. And that'll conclude our testing.